Good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. I will present my presentation in Vietnamese, so please take your headset, please. Oh, you can change.
So listening to the presentation from Richard Island and the presentation from the Philippine delegation, on behalf of the delegates from Vietnam, I would like to share with you some information about the perspectives or the view from the VST, the Vietnam State Treasury, in fiscal risk management. As Mr. Richard Island said, depending on the allocations of functions in each jurisdiction, fiscal risk may be assigned to different agencies. For example, if you listen to the Philippines, you can see that the State Treasury acts as the secretary for the production of the fiscal risk statement. They are the ones who compile information and they do the analysis of the inputs of different related stakeholders. That's interesting. And before my presentation, I want to say that in Vietnam, the VST is not directly involved in the in fiscal risk management. The VST is involved by providing input information, and then we are involved in cash management, especially in the issuance of government bonds in the domestic market. Perhaps I may want to skip the concepts and principles. I want to move on to the second part of my presentation. I can say that there are several fiscal risks that we have identified from the existing studies. We can see that fiscal risk in Vietnam may be arisen from macroeconomic shocks. Even though we have a quite high economic growth, but we can see a lot of risks, and especially during the COVID pandemic. You know that the world economy and the Vietnam economy were severely affected, and revenues and expenditures and public debts were also affected because the government had to adopt a number of policies for social protection and economic maintenance. Secondly, we want to look at the contingent liabilities. The guaranteed debts are declining, but it's still quite huge as a stock. It's about 10% of GDP. Thirdly, we can see the banking sector as a risk. Mostly we issue bonds in domestics, and the key borrowers are commercial banks. And if the commercial banks have a distress, and then it has impacts on public debts and vice versa. We also have the risks in natural disasters and epidemics. In addition to the COVID pandemic, according to the recent climate risk report, over the past 20 years, Vietnam is one of the 6 countries most vulnerable to the climate change. I think that the Philippines joins Vietnam to be among the countries that are highly prone to the climate change. But I didn't listen to that from the presentation. Maybe he just look at the overall things. So disasters and epidemics will reduce budget revenues, and then it arise more expenditures for social protection and for recovery from disasters. Next, we would like to talk about the aging population as a risk. Vietnam is rapidly aging, which requires a lot of aging expenditure for the elderly. In addition, we also have risks in the SNG, the subnational government's borrowing, slow implementation of public investments, and PPP contracts. So, as I have mentioned, the VST is not directly involved in fiscal risk management. And in this slide, I would like to describe all of the agencies within the government according to existing legislations that have some responsibilities in fiscal risk management. So the State Budget Act is the ultimate document in public finance that requires the projection of fiscal risks in the medium-term fiscal framework, but there's no legislations that requires fiscal risk assessment and management. So according to the allocation to the labor divisions, we have the MPI, the Ministry of Planning and Investment. This is the ministry that is responsible for the macroeconomic framework and PPP projects. Secondly, we have the State Bank of Vietnam, who is responsible for the monetary policies, which is also related to the fiscal operations. And then we have departments in the MOF, and the VST is part of the MOF. However, we also have other departments that are more directly involved. We can see the Banking and Financial Institutions Department, who is responsible for regulating government guarantees. We also have the debt office in the debt management and external finance department. For the management of SOEs, we have the corporate finance department. Island mentioned that in the MOF, there may be functions for the management of SOEs. So you can see that there are many things involved, and one of that is to do a risk, SOE risk, fiscal risk. And about state budget management for both the central government and sub-national governments, that is related to the state budget department. To my understanding, in Vietnam, our budget system is different to the others. We have a nested budget system. So in summary, our state budget as defined in the State Budget Act to include the central government's budgets and the budgets of all subnational governments. Below that, we have the budgets of the districts and the communes. So the state treasuries have to manage the budget allocations, revenues and expenditures of all levels of governments. And in this row, I would like to mention the Institute of Financial and Strategy, the NAF. They are responsible for fiscal risk reporting, but this is the emerging task just recently allocated. And in this light, I would like to share with you more specifically about the role of the VSTs within the MOF regarding financial and state budget management functions. I already mentioned it somehow. The VST is responsible to manage the state budget execution, extra budgetary funds, cash management, debt raising, and we also, perform the accounting general functions. We also issue government bonds. In the MOF, we have the State Budget Department, who is responsible for state budget management. They are the ones who prepare the medium-term budgets and the annual budgets. We have the Debt Management and External Finance Department, who is responsible for public debt borrowing and repayment, financing, guarantees and ODAs, and also the aids and lending from Vietnam to other governments. We also have the Corporate Finance Department. We have the Banking Financial Institutions Department, who is responsible for financial regulations of bank credit, financial institutions, management of external. We also have other functions like Investment Department, who is responsible for capital expenditures, and a Public Expenditure Department, who is responsible for operational expenditures of different sectors like health, education. I would like to share with you that with the four key functions of the VST. One is the budget execution management, cash management, accounting general, government bonds issuance, how we are involved in fiscal risk management. So first, for the management of budget execution, by keeping track of revenues and expenditures. We will make sure that the budget is executed as intended, to reduce the macroeconomic risks and impacts of the disasters. We are involved in the development of the legal framework for revenue collection management. We try to capture revenue collections and also carry out the revenue collections paid by organizations and individuals. We also propose measures to reform budget revenue collections in different cities and provinces. This is related because the VST in Vietnam has a network at both the central government and 63 provinces, and below that we have district treasury offices. So this is a network that is centrally managed with about 700 offices. Secondly, so that's on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, the VSTs also conduct the verification and controls of budget expenditures and other expenditures of the public sector. And about expenditure controls, we place as the gatekeeper to control before payment processing. So with the functions of expenditure controls, we also manage commitments. We also monitor the advances, and we also prioritize payments. For example, during the COVID, for example, the payments for the vaccine procurement or other pandemic control activities and cash transfer to the citizens. The state treasuries contribute to the sound and healthy expenditure management to achieve efficiency and to achieve financial soundness. The budget execution management also help us to provide a timely report. We also provide information on the budget fund balances and disbursement. The second key function is cash management. So like our friends in the Philippines, the VST has a TSA. The TSA has been developed for quite a long time. And in November 2019, we have the real flash TSAs. We have already consolidated all the cash balances in our accounts in the state bank. We concentrated the cash balances of the central governments, all extra budgetary funds, and all provinces in one single account. Well, it's helpful in providing liquidity to meet the budget payment requirements and to reduce liquidity risk for the government, which also supports the SPV in their monetary policy operations so as to mitigate the macroeconomic impacts. So with the cash flow forecasting, we prepare different scenarios for investment of cash surplus and to deal with cash shortfalls. So this is to support prudent cash management and efficient cash management and to generate incomes for the budgets. We do cash flow forecasting quite regularly. We also have some measures. For example, we can regulate the debt financing to ensure that the fiscal policies is carried out efficiently. The concentration of cash resources can help to build resources for investments and to lend to the central government. So the method of investments is deposit placement in commercial banks or reverse repos. In one hand, it helps the central government to reduce borrowing needs at the time of volatility. It can also save resources, save money for the central budgets, and to reduce the risk for the budget fund. Another function is the issuance of government bonds to finance the central government. The Central Treasury has the functions to issue G-bonds in the domestic market to finance the budget and to refinance our debts. We also have the External Finance and Debt Management Department, who is responsible for overall debt management. We can see that we have performed quite well in G-bond issuance to make sure that we have a prudent debt issuance policies and to restructure our debt portfolios. Domestic borrowing will meet the requirements for budget financing. G-bonds issuance, domestic markets account for about 70% of our borrowings, so that we can be able to reduce external borrowing and we can reduce the FX risk for the budget. We also restructure our maturity profile by trying to diversify our issuing maturities. We have the range of maturities from 5 to 30 years, and in the recent years, we try to lengthen the maturity of our bonds issued at least 5 years, so that we can smoothen the repayment profile, so that we can avoid the risk to avoid liquidity risk when we want to refinance. We also work with other departments in the MOF to implement measures for domestic G-bond markets, for example, by weekly auctioning of bonds, disclosure of the issuing calendars and communication with primary dealers. And we also try to strengthen long-term investor base like insurers to try to increase the share of long-term bonds. The holdings of commercial banks from 80 or 85%. Now the holdings of commercial banks is only 40%, so that we can be able to develop good channels to finance the central governments, and we can borrow at any time whenever the central government is in need, and we can, by that we can also reduce fiscal risk and debt borrowing risk. Another important thing, as Mr. Ayland and other colleagues from the Philippines say, that we need to strengthen the cooperation between debt management and cash management, so that when we have a liquidity problem in the market, when the market is in distress, and if we have a sufficient cash, we can lend to the central government so that we can reduce market rates, but we can still ensure liquidity for the central government without issuing government bonds in the market. And starting from 2021, the VST is also responsible for the management of the vaccine fund. So we received contributions from all organizations and citizens, domestically and externally, for the research and production and procurement of vaccines, so that we can reduce pressure on the fiscal pressures for that. According to our statistics, in last Thursday, we have mobilized more than 10,000 trillion VNDs, and we have spent for research of vaccines. 2/3 of that is for research. The state treasuries also invested the cash surplus of the vaccine funds to strengthen the efficiency of fund management. Now, I would like to move on to the fourth function. I think this function is also common for all treasuries. It's typical for treasuries, not only among the PEMNA members, but also globally. That is the function of accounting general. We do the accounting of all budget transactions for all government levels, as I mentioned from the beginning, and we also prepare the budget final account statements. Before 2015, we prepared the budget execution report or the final account statements. That was the functions of the state budget department. But starting from 2015, the VST took over. We are starting to prepare the whole government financial statements. That was mentioned in the accounting law issued in 2015, and we are starting to prepare the financial statements in 2019 for the fiscal year 2018. So we've been producing financial statements for 3 years, for 2019, 2020, 2021. We are collecting information from all public sector entities to be able to prepare the financial statements for fiscal year 2021. I understand that different countries will have differences in Vietnam. It seems that your budget execution reports also call financial statements, but in Vietnam, the budget execution report is what we have been producing for a long time. We recently are trying to produce the accrual financial statements to be able to understand about assets and liabilities. So this is quite new.
Thế thì thông qua cái báo cáo quyết toán ngân sách nhà nước sẽ là cung cấp cái thông tin cho các cơ quan quản lý, là phục vụ công tác hoạch định chính sách, hỗ trợ công tác đánh giá rủi ro để đảm bảo cái tính bền vững của ngân sách. Chúng tôi là phối hợp với các cơ quan và các đơn vị để thực hiện.
We are working with a different agency for the management of budget, and we also monitor the central governments and sub-national governments to follow up with the audit recommendations to strengthen fiscal discipline and to improve budget efficiency. This is one of the functions during the accounting function. So with the accounting reports, we can be able to assess the performance of the budgets and the autonomy in budget decentralization. This is one of the big risks, especially in the context that the revenue share to some provinces, are being slowing down because of the impacts of the COVID-19. We also have to spare resources for the provinces to develop their own economies as we have decentralized to them. The budget execution report or the final accounts also provide very good information. We also present the tax areas that will be very helpful to do risk assessment in revenue policies. On the expenditure side, the final accounts on expenditures, for example, for different functions like health, education, environment protections, we use information to measure the efficiencies of the or performance of policies. As I said, we are at the initial stage in preparing the accrual of financial statements, even though it's providing some information to help with risk management. I can see that we have more accrual information on the liability sides, and we also provide information on assets and revenues and income, so that we can be able to measure. We also provide information, for example, the debt ratios and deficits, so that we can be able to measure the efficiency and effectiveness of and sustainability of public finance. The financial statements also reflects the liabilities of spending units and extra budgetary funds, so that it will be very helpful because we have a more comprehensive information on all liabilities of the public sectors. The accrual financial statements we have not published yet. There are some reasons for that, and one of that is that the information in the financial statements are not quite we do not have sufficient information, for example, infrastructure information, for example. So I don't think that the financial statements is comprehensive enough. That's why our authorities, when we submit it to the Parliament, to the National Assembly, they suggested that the financial statements should not be published at the time being. So with the 4 functions of the VST, we can see that some lessons can be drawn. I think that this is something we can share with other PEMNA members, so that we can have some information. But I think that this is also for discussion, for us to learn from each other. And we want also to learn how the other treasuries are doing with fiscal risk management. So these are some of the lessons that we have identified. Firstly, we have a VST network, which is a deconcentrated system. We have a unified management from the central level to the district level, to the provincial level and district level. We are also working with the other systems of the tax and customs and banking systems to capture information on budget execution for the assessments of the possibility of government financing. We also think that cash management reforms is following international good practices, taking into account the local circumstances by developing the TSA and the investment of idle cash, treatment of cash shortfalls by linking cash, budget and debt management, so that we can strengthen fiscal sustainability. G1 issuance should be linked with debt restructuring to reduce refinancing risks and to improve sustainability in public debt management, budget management. to make sure that we can raise G bonds, by taking into account the absorbability of the markets and the development of the domestic markets, to make the domestic market a key financing channel for the government to achieve fiscal prudence and sustainability. Cash management and G bond issuance should be coordinated closely with fiscal and monetary policy operations and other macro policies operations. The amount to borrow should be relevant with to be taking into account the solvency and absorbability of the markets to ensure efficiency and prudence in the other markets. We see that we have 6 challenges without changes in the functions assigned to us regarding fiscal risk management. I think that we have a lot of volatilities and uncertainties in the world of monetary conditions, with increasing inflation, monetary tightening by many central banks, with implications on the domestic financial markets in Vietnam, reducing our revenues and the cost of borrowing by issuing government bonds. Secondly, we can see a lot of political turmoil, the pandemic. For example, recently we have the war, we have the volatility in the commodity prices, which increases the production costs, severely impacting budget revenues and budget deficits. The third one is that the size of our domestic market is still small compared with the other countries in the region. The market is underdeveloped, both in terms of professionalism and others, so we are vulnerable to changes in the market. Fourthly, we can see that we need to improve regulations on expenditure controls for the budget by strengthening autonomy, self-responsibility of budget users. And the state treasury will also have to adopt the risk-based approach to shift from ex-ante control to ex-post controls. And we need to improve the institutional settings for the controls of multi-year contracts or multi-year commitments. Fifthly, we need to shorten the processes and the time for the budget execution reports. According to the laws, we are supposed to produce final accounts after 18 years from the end of the fiscal year, which seem to be quite slow. But as I mentioned, that Vietnam is very peculiar in the way that we have a nested budget systems with 4 government levels altogether. So we have to report for about 200,000 spending units, 63 provinces, 636 districts, and the communes. This is not only in the control of the VST. We need to revise a lot of laws and including the state budget law. The 6th challenge is that the financial statements, we do not have comprehensive legislations on the preparation of the financial statements, or we do not have a good capacity to produce the accrual financial statements. We don't have good systems to be connected with different entities to produce the financial statements. The financial statements is not comprehensive enough, and it does not capture very important information like infrastructure access, as I mentioned. And that's why, as we prepared the presentations, we try to learn from other experience of the countries and how the Treasury should be involved in fiscal risk management. I didn't find any, but this morning we listened to the presentation of Mr. Richard Island and the Philippines, and I think that the Treasury of the Philippines have been involved in fiscal risk management since 2011. I really admire you, and I'm not sure how you can do that. What kind of resources you have to spend on that. How you started all the efforts. How it evolves over time, what laws will govern the responsibilities for your Treasury. So that's why I would like to raise 2 questions as in the screen. I really hope to receive the answers and information shared by the other members. Thank you very much.